Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is September 29th, 2017. It is my daughter Anna's birthday. Happy birthday, Anna. She's not listening, but I want to wish her happy birthday anyway. And it's a very early morning interview. I don't know that we've ever done an interview this early. It's 7:57 a.m. And I'm very excited for today's interview. We're going to be interviewing Kirsten and David Udy or Udy. They can tell us how they're going to pronounce it. But basically, this interview covers at least two important series that we're doing on Mormon Stories Podcast. The first is we're kicking off a new series on mixed faith marriages. We had this wonderful mixed faith marriage retreat in Salt Lake City in August with Julie Diaz-Avedo-Hanks and myself. We had 21 couples there. It was a really powerful experience. And coming out of that was just this clear need to talk more about how couples navigate successfully a mixed faith marriage. So today is going to be part one of that series. David, at some point, lost his Mormon faith, and Kirsten is still a believer. And so we're just very excited that they'd be willing to come on and talk about how they navigate their marriage. We're also going to be, this is also part three of our series on overcoming addiction. We've done two wonderful interviews so far on Mormon Stories on opiate addiction. And I highly recommend those interviews because there's an epidemic of opiate addiction and just substance abuse within Utah and Mormonism, just like there is in the broader U.S. and possibly world culture. So it's important to talk about it. In this case, we're going to be talking about overcoming alcohol addiction. And David is going to particularly tell us a bit about his journey, how he became an alcoholic, and then how he and Kirsten fought and struggled together to overcome it. We're going to try and do this interview in less than 2 hours. We're really excited for everyone who is joining us live on Facebook Live. We have 25 people so far. And we want to encourage our listeners to post comments and questions because it's always more fun when it's interactive. So really quickly, before we begin, I'll just do some really quick announcements. Please follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Mormon Stories. Please like our Facebook page at Mormon Stories Podcast on Facebook. Please give us a positive review on the Mormon Stories Podcast Facebook page. We're at 4.9 out of 5, and we need more reviews so that doesn't lower. And then finally, please log into iTunes and give us a positive review on iTunes. These are the sorts of things where if you can't support us financially, they still make a big difference. Always we want to thank our donors who make all this possible. If you go to mormonstories.org in the top right, there's a little donation button. And less than 1% of our listeners are donors. And we would really love to get that percentage up because it takes financial support to make the open stories possible. So please support us if you can. Very quickly, we have a few events coming up. October 27th, we're doing a workshop on rebuilding a life during and after a faith crisis. That's going to be in Utah County, again, October 27th, and it's a full day. Please go to mormonstories.org/events if you want to be a part of that all-day workshop. We're also doing a half-day workshop on November 17th in Utah County on healthy relationships. So that's going to include healthy marriages, communicating with believing family and friends, raising healthy children during and after a Mormon faith crisis. And then, of course, we're coming to San Francisco November 9th and 10th. And next year, we are doing a cruise to the Bahamas October 24th through 28th. And, of course, our hearts go out to all the people in the Caribbean who have been affected by the recent hurricanes. Hopefully we can bring some commerce to their islands to help them recuperate. And we're accepting nominations. We're about to release our calendar for events for 2018. But if you want us to come to your area in 2018, please email us at mormonstories@gmail.com. All right, those are our announcements. And now we are so thrilled to welcome to Mormon Stories Podcast, Kirsten and David. Is it Udy or Udy? How do I pronounce that?
It's Udy.
Udy, okay.
With you.
All right. Well, Kirsten and David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome.
You're welcome.
It's a real honor. So I think it would be best to begin kind of having each of you tell a little bit about your story. Kirsten, what if we had you start? How would that work?
Okay.
Tell us just a bit about your Mormon background.
So I'm the oldest of 4 children. I have 1 brother and 2 sisters, and was raised in a very active, loving home. And I'm a returned missionary. I served in the Lisbon, Portugal mission in the years of 1991 to 1992. And I had a great experience there. I loved sharing the gospel and was able to see a lot of the country. I was on the Azores and the Madeira Islands also. For me, that was a huge stepping stone in my life. I always struggled academically in school, and so to be able to go on my mission and be given the gift of tongues, I really learned a lot spiritually, and just put it in my pocket as I am smart and I can do great things with the Lord's help. I'm a registered nurse and I enjoy my profession. I'm actually back in school right now working on my bachelor's degree. And so, like I said, my mission was a huge stepping stone in my life, just to prove to me that I was capable of great things. As far as my family goes, I do have a sister that is a meth addict. She's been an addict for 26 years. I've been touched with addiction very personally pretty much my whole entire life. And it's been an interesting journey and a hard one. I, for a long time, was the only active child in my family. My sister is now active, my youngest sister, and has been sealed in the temple to her family. And so that is an awesome thing for me to have her be a part of the church. And my parents are still both active. They are divorced. They got divorced after 30 years. My dad is married to another woman now, and my mom has remained single. And I grew up in a small town. I'm from Brigham City, Utah. That was a great place to grow up. And I was sheltered from a lot of worldly things by living in a small town. I had the opportunity to grow up with my grandparents, both of them just down the street. I worked with my grandmother when I was 16, and so family relations have always been very close and important in my life and full of love. What else can I say?
Tell us what the church has meant to you. What's through it all, what's sort of been the rock of your testimony or your faith?
So for me, since we're talking about my marriage today, and going into my marriage, it was an eternal decision. When I married Dave, I knew it was going to be for eternity, through the hard, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think, what we've been through, especially with alcoholism, that's been my anchor, that I really believe that my family is eternal and that I was not going to give up on it in any way. The word of wisdom, for me too, if we're talking religion, is a core value for me. It's deep inside of me, and I've abided by that my whole entire life. I'm 45 years old and I haven't even ever had a drink of coffee. That's how, I guess, fervent and passionate I've been about that. And, I just from a young age wanted that to be a part of my life. And so without my religion and my beliefs, I really don't know if our family would still be together.
I love it. What would you say your core beliefs are rooted in? Is it a spiritual witness? Was it a moment in time where you received a witness? Was it just something that built? What do you pin your conviction or your faith to?
So, like I said before, I was born into the gospel, and so I think it was building a stone upon stone. And then through life experiences, I've had to really analyze and look at the gospel principles and how they apply in my life, and do they really make sense to me. I would say through my adulthood that the life experiences that I've had with my immediate family have given me spiritual experiences where I truly feel that that is my connection to God and a higher power. And I believe that Jesus Christ is our elder brother. I think he's a real person. I think his atonement is real and that it applies to us in so many different ways, not just for being forgiven of our sins, but for our heartache, our pains, our joys, everything that we experience in life.
Beautiful. Well, thanks again, Kirsten. Is it scary to come on Mormon Stories as a believer?
Yes. I'll tell the truth. It is a little scary, but it's good.
All right. Well, we really appreciate your willing to do this. We appreciate your support of Dave. We appreciate your commitment to your marriage, because that's one of the main reasons we do what we do on Mormon Stories. Is we feel like religion should never split up a family. And so I know many believing people who end their marriage when their spouse stops believing. And I'm just really grateful that you've stuck it out and you've cared about your marriage more than anything else, because that is, I think that's got to be what the gospel's about, right? Is not giving up on family. If the gospel means anything, it's got to mean that. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dave, welcome to Mormon Stories. You've been a longtime listener and friend of ours. So Dave, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of your background? It may have been a little bit different than Kirsten's, but let's.
Different.
Yeah, it was a little different. We kind of grew up in the same area. I grew up through elementary school and junior high in the Tremont area. Went to high school in Brigham City. So we kind of saw each other around in high school, but I was with a different crowd. So we're kind of two you'd never in a million years expect to get together. But here we are. My upbringing, I was raised in the LDS faith. My mom has always been very active in believing in the church, still is. And we were, me and all my siblings were dragged kicking and screaming or whatever into church every Sunday. We were always there. For my childhood, there was more abuse going on. My mom was married total of 5 times. She remarried my dad once. I'm gonna kind of skim over a lot of what went on, but I'll just say there was just a lot of abuse. There was a lot of physical abuse. There was sexual abuse, and I'm not going to go into any detail on that, especially just for privacy of those that it happened to. I just have to say that the people that happened to deserve, anybody that may listen to this, please just don't even speculate, and those people deserve all the anonymity and privacy about that in the world.
Sure.
But that didn't happen to me, but the knowledge of that affects me greatly still, and we'll probably get into some of that. Some of the stepdads were, just to kind of give a sense of some of the abuse. Some of the stepdads, especially one, John, his name was John, not you, but he was particularly abusive. He was he was an engineer. And we were really excited when my mom decided to get married to him because he was kind of this educated person, but he was kind of also a Harley biker and really liked his cars, and you know, I don't know if he was a drug dealer, but he did a lot of drugs. I know that, and he wouldn't let us upstairs in this house. He would only let the kids be downstairs. Kind of rigged up a shower downstairs for us to take showers in, and would leave cereal and milk on the steps before going to work, so we'd have breakfast. And I was kind of starting my teenage years, so I was really out of control and pretty rebellious and pushing back against a guy that I had no business pushing back against. I mean, so one day, you know, we took off me and a friend took off in his El Camino, and he worshipped his cars. I went joyriding all day in his El Camino and digging into his Playboys and all that stuff, and came back, and he found out, and he beat me pretty good. You know, I was bent over on my hands and knees and kicked me across my ribs. So it's kind of gives you a sense. And there was one night when we could hear him just beating the crap out of my mom upstairs. I could hear her screaming. You could hear the blows. And I had a .22 rifle downstairs, and I was sitting at the bottom of the stairs. And if he came out of that door, in my mind, I was ready to shoot him. I don't know if I would have. I'm glad he never came out, but I have to express a little bit just to give you a sense, the audience a sense of what was really going on. And for some reason in my childhood mind, until I was adult, I never understood that I was growing up in abuse. It never dawned on me. It's kind of weird how that works, but I understand that pretty clearly now.
I'm so sorry. What a very incredibly difficult childhood and adolescence.
Thanks, appreciate that. And so now I have to try to understand how it affects me, so that I don't react in destructive ways, which I have sometimes. So now I want to talk a little bit about the church, my relationship with the church going through all this. So one experience was kind of a highlight for me is it was at the age of 12 when I was going to be ordained a deacon. They lost my baptismal records, and so I needed to be rebaptized before I could be ordained a deacon. And I just remember, and I didn't come up with this on my own head, but I just remember that I was really going to be perfect. Like, right, I'm rebaptized and I'm going to be all clean. And I had this thing built up in my mind about trying to be perfect. And I didn't come out with that. That was something that I was kind of echoing sentiment around me as a 12-year-old. But yeah, I really remember just trying to be perfect for quite a while. And then really, it didn't take that long to find out how futile that was. But this is all about the time when adolescence kind of comes along. My body's starting to do new things, and that sense of trying to be perfect turned into a lot of shame, and it really had a backfire for me. And I don't know, just there, and not just I guess the shame that I'm talking about. It had a lot to do with also just my environment. So I had a lot of with the abuse that was going on, and a lot of the instability. My inner core didn't feel right about things. So I didn't feel good about myself. I felt like I just started to feel like I'm not a good person. I started to identify. I didn't recognize it this way at the time, but I started to identify just as a unworthy, not good person. And by the time I'm 13, there's a lot of stuff going on in the background here that I'm kind of skipping over. But by the time I'm 13, that's when I'm kind of starting to smoke. By the time I'm 14, 15, I'm smoking a pack a day. There was some. I smoked marijuana here and there. I did a little LSD, but that kind of came later on. I was more like 18 when I did a little of that. It was mostly just like marijuana use and a little bit of alcohol, but I didn't love alcohol. I liked marijuana more. And in my mind, I was a drug addict. Although looking back on it, I was clearly not addicted. I was addicted to cigarettes for sure, but I wasn't addicted to any drugs. But there was kind of a period with me and my friends where we were kind of like a druggy crowd. That was kind of, you know, how the teens kind of look at this crowd and they're the druggy crowd. We were kind of part of that crowd. In Brigham City, they hung out in the north parking lot. That was kind of where that group hung out, and I was always there, swapping school. But I remember there was a period of time when me and my friends started going to some like NA meetings or AA meetings and that kind of thing. And we weren't like wanting to quit marijuana. It was more like we just liked that. For some reason, somebody got us going there, and we liked to talk and be able to express ourselves, and we liked to sit around and have coffee. But I remember like going to those meetings, and when I'd introduce myself, I would introduce myself as an addict. So I really clearly identified myself as addicted, even though we had there was emotional issues for sure, but yeah, no physical addiction to anything other than cigarettes. So I just wanted to kind of cover that.
So that was in your adolescence, and was this while you were attending church?
Let's see. I'm trying to think about when my mom stopped being able to get me to church anymore. I don't know I can't remember when I stopped. I probably stopped going to church around the age of 15 or 16. And there was a couple of periods of time where she sent us off to live. Her and my dad were divorced, and he was living in Colorado. So there was a period where we were out of control, and she'd send us to live there. And so then obviously we weren't going to church when we were with him. So I think it was about probably the age of 16, I would say, that I wasn't going to church anymore. She just couldn't make me anymore.
And you feel like in some ways your perfectionistic thinking as a Mormon backfired in the sense that you felt so much shame and guilt that maybe the substances were to self-medicate the guilt and shame? Is that how you put it together as you look back?
I wouldn't say that I felt like I wasn't feeling a lot of shame or guilt. I wasn't feeling that as any kind of emotion. It was more like there was in my mind I didn't understand the one true church thing. That was not even in my vocabulary then. I didn't understand it that way. It was just I was brought up in the church. It was just a church, and there was this kind of bar that the church formed. So I thought of a person that's kind of an active, like other teens my age that were going to church. They had this sort of way about them, and that was not me. So it wasn't like I was ashamed. I was at least emotionally feeling a lot of shame. It was just that I identified as somebody who was not that and could not be that. Like so it felt like there was sort of this very high, unattainable bar that was just not me, and I couldn't be me. And so I think that core identification I had, it held me in a kind of a dark place.
So what ended up reactivating you to Mormonism? That led to you going on a mission?
Yeah, that's important. So yeah, I'm about the age of, I guess I was about 19. I think 19 or 20. Well, I don't remember being able to legally buy cigarettes. That's why.
It's okay. What happened?
The age doesn't matter, but yeah, kind of a really young adult, and I am living by myself in renting out a floor of a house. I'm just by myself, kind of emotionally in a pretty dark place. I have a smoking habit, pack a day. I don't really like that, and I'm pretty unhealthy. Smoking marijuana, just kind of doing my thing, and I'm working. I was working, but I was feeling pretty low all the time. And I was just kind of there, and a Jehovah's Witness and his son came and proselyted to my door, and they shared their message. It was pretty basic. It was just their Bible message. They didn't go into any in deep regarding Jehovah's Witnesses. It was a message that a Mormon or any other Christian religion would resonate with. And he just gave me the message, and then after he left, I went in my room and I had a prayer, and I had a really profound spiritual experience. And the kind of experience where it just felt inside like the whole room was lit up, that kind of thing. Just pretty profound, powerful. And I wouldn't say there was any like message communicated. It was just a powerful feeling of inspiration. And, but yeah, right after that, I took I just had a brand new carton of cigarettes. I threw those in the dumpster. I flushed a bag of marijuana, and I drove right over to my mom's house, and I told her I was going to get ready and go on an LDS mission. And, and I did. I did do that. And so the next kind of 6 months or so was in preparation for that mission. And that was kind of a experience for me. I had a lot of, I'll just say I started having a lot of dreams, and kind of apocalyptic dreams that felt really very real to me. So there was just for some reason, a lot of like dreams, like seeing Salt Lake City wiped out with tornadoes, that kind of
Sure.
thing. And so that was kind of just the whole time during my preparation, I was feeling that. And I remember also at some point, I think they had the missionaries come and visit with me and give me the whole thing of discussions and just going to church every Sunday. And it didn't take long, and I remember it kind of clicking. Oh, this is the one true church. I remember that I didn't understand that, and then it's like here a little while into this is the one true church. And I remember I need to go back and talk to Sonny, who was the Jehovah's Witness that kind of come to me. I went and visited with him to try to convert him to Mormonism. And I don't think he loved. He never seemed too happy with the idea that I'm going on a LDS mission, but I remember doing that. I don't know. That was sort of just.
And so from there, you decided to go on a mission.
Yeah, and I put in my papers as soon as I could, and I had to go visit a general authority because of my past sins. I was kind of, if you do certain things, you have to do that. So I had to go visit Marlon K. Jensen. It's kind of an interesting story because I got told I need to go to the church office building at X next time, and so I go over there, but I just didn't have a clue, and nobody was kind of really guiding me. And I show up there in a jeans and a t-shirt and just walk through the church office building up to Marlon K. Jensen's office. And I remember sitting out in the lobby area just outside of his office, and his secretaries kind of kept glancing over at me weird, and I just didn't understand why. And anyway, I went in and had the meeting with him and the interview with him, which was really, really good. He's a really good guy, and he really understanding and proved my mission. And then he kind of told me, next time you come up here, just make sure you wear a shirt and a tie. And kind of told me when you go back out, just make sure you kind of go around the
back way.
The back way, because some people aren't as understanding as me.
So Dave, we're going to do something that's going to be really hard. Because I want to focus on the mixed faith marriage and the alcoholism, I'm going to ask you just to kind of summarize. I know there's probably 10, 15 years, and instead of for this portion going into the story more, so you serve a mission, you get married in the temple, and I assume that for some period of time you remained sort of a believer to the extent that you could. I know it's a disservice to your story to not be able to dig in, but we don't have time for that today, given our time constraints. So let me just ask Kirsten, when you married Dave, was there a sense that the church was a really important part of why you got married?
Yeah. So for me, we met. I had been back from my mission for 3 weeks, and I was speaking with a high councilman in his ward, and he had actually been back from his mission for 3 days. So, I had that synergy inside of myself that people can be forgiven, and he's made a change in his life, and he wants the gospel to be a part of his life. And, I didn't see any red flags as we would talk about things. He was very open and honest with me about his past and what he had done. And so the relationship of trust was building in a very positive way. Our courtship, though, was only 5 months from the time we met until we got married, which was looking back, extremely fast, extremely, we truly did not know every component of each other and our thought processes and how we viewed things. But that's our story. And
what did you sense the marriage was built on in terms of the gospel? What did you feel? What was the gospel related agreement you were entering into as you married Dave from your perspective?
that we were going to make it a part of our lives, and we were going to teach our children the gospel, and that we were, going to go to church every Sunday, and that my children would be receiving priesthood blessings if they were sick or going to school. I mean, it was going to be our life.
Okay.
It was going to be our compass.
Now, Dave, again, acknowledging that we had to skip over way too much stuff, and we should probably have our own interview with you. As you were entering into your marriage with Kirsten, what did the gospel mean to you, and what did you feel like you were committing to in terms of the gospel as it related to your marriage?
Right. So I was very committed to Kirsten personally. So that was just Kirsten and taking care of. I remember during our courtship, just really feeling a commitment that I'm going to take care of my family, and so that was a big part of it. But as far as the church goes, it was sort of, that's just what you do. I remember being on my mission that there was talk after talk at our zone conferences. Whenever we had those conferences where the president was speaking, he was always talking about making sure you get married soon after that's your next thing after you get home. I remember that being talked to me a lot. So I just kind of, in my core, knew I needed to get married and start raising a family and get married in the temple. And there was also just a sense of fear. I don't know if I thought about that openly in my mind. I know it was there. I just was worried about myself. I didn't want to go home and take much time and then fall back into some of my old ways. So in my mind, getting married was a way to prevent that. So Kirsten spoke in my ward, 3 days after I got home. So literally I think it was literally the first eligible girl to marry that I saw after I got home. I'm hooking up with her. That kind of shows kind of the concern I had. It was just there. It's not like I, in my mind, thought of doing it that way. It's just the way that it sort of went out. So.
And Dave, you didn't get to talk about it, but just summarize where your testimony or faith was at the time you got married, just in a sentence or two, really.
I believed it, but I remember throughout my mission having periods of serious doubt. I've been introduced by a companion by his hands upon Papyrus, that book. I knew about some of the issues, and I remember having periods of doubt on my mission, but just shelving them. So I had concerns, but had shelved concerns. But my front of my head, I could get up in church and bear my testimony and be honest about it. But there were shelf items building.
So when you married Kirsten, by her perception, you would have been believing and committed to the gospel.
Absolutely, and
okay.
I would have not expressed any doubt or concern whatsoever, and I was honest with it.
Okay, so how many years was it until, David, your faith really started to crumble? We probably won't be able to get into the buildup of it, right. But sort of how many years until your faith just started really crumbling?
Well, I had an initial, what I call a shelf break, in probably, it took a few years. I have to think about how many years it was.
It doesn't matter.
But I had a preliminary shelf break, but my final, like the one where it just went.
What was the preliminary one about? Just so that we understand what caused.
It was about, it was concerns about the Book of Mormon anachronisms, the Book of Abraham problems. I don't think I knew about the DNA issues yet, but just sort of just general anachronisms. I read the Book of Mormon a number of times, and it just started sounding made up to me for different reasons, and I was having a hard time believing it. But I actually, I remember talking to Kirsten's dad, and he was trying to help me resolve some of those concerns. And I ended up just doubling down. So I went in I went all in after that experience and said, I'm just going to really do this.
And approximately how many years into your marriage was this first kind of crack in your shelf?
Probably
Would have been what about 2002? 7
Okay.
years. I think 7 years would have been the first one. So it would have been about 2001, 2002.
And the sources would have been what? What were the sources that you came upon relating to Book of Mormon historicity and Book of Abraham and stuff like that?
Well, I think I explained where the Book of Abraham concern came from.
Your mission, right?
Yeah, and the Book of Mormon concerns, I hadn't read anything like any anti-Mormon source. I just knew about them. I'd heard about them.
Okay.
I read the Book of Mormon enough, but I don't remember even where I knew about the acronisms. I knew about them.
Okay.
I would read the Book of Mormon and some of the, like when they would prophesy in there about things that had already occurred, like if there was prophecies about Christopher Columbus, I'm like, why is it like so specific about these things that Joseph would have known about? But
so they were just questions or things you had heard. There wasn't some book or the Tanners or anything like that you had stumbled upon. Okay. So those were early cracks, 4 or 5 years in. When did things really start cracking and how?
So it would have been in 2004. We moved to Las Vegas, and in Las Vegas, our son was diagnosed with Langerhans cell histiocytosis, which is a really very, very serious kind of a disease that requires chemotherapy and life-threatening. We were living in the hospital for a while, doing shifts, me and my wife there, and so it was kind of in this. It happened after this kind of time of a lot of really difficult things going on in the background, and we decided to move back to Logan from Las Vegas because we really needed some family support. We just felt really isolated in Las Vegas, and this was just too much. So we moved back to Logan, and
I really wanted primary children.
Yeah.
Coming from a mom nurse perspective, I felt like his medical care needed to come back to Utah. Also, a component in that situation, I was only 3 weeks postpartum when our son was diagnosed with his disease. And when he was diagnosed, it was 3 in a million. So it's a very, very rare disease. It was only in his skeletal system, but there were other emotional dynamics going on, if you will. 3 weeks postpartum from having a baby. It was probably one of the most stressful times in our lives. And then we are selling a house, we're moving back. If you think about the most stressful things that people can go through, moves and chronically ill things are rated in the top 5.
Yeah.
And,
right.
New babies.
You had 3 or 4. Yeah.
So it was soon after we moved back to Logan, and I got through a period where when we were living in Las Vegas, I was going to the temple a lot, and I started to do genealogy. And we moved back to Logan, and I had this personal ancestry file program, and I had a lot of our genealogy on there. I just remember I was just looking through our genealogy, and for some reason I happened through one of my ancestors, John W. Hess, who was a polygamist, and I found out I noticed he had 7 wives, and I knew about polygamy, and it didn't bother me, but I noticed this, and I found out that just looking, because you can kind of see how everything links together, I realized that his 7th wife was his 12-year-old niece, and he was 51 when he married her, and that just, when I realized that, it just struck me. And I started looking at, like Brigham Young and Joseph Smith's polygamy, look just on the church's own website, I started seeing their marriage and like how wives were intermarried between them and Heber C. Kimball. And just all of a sudden I had this whitewashed version in my head of what polygamy was, and all of a sudden the reality of what was going on with polygamy just hit me like a tidal wave. And I had these other concerns that were on the shelf, and all of a sudden I'm like, there's something just in my core, there's something up here. And I just said to myself, I'm just gonna look and I'm gonna find out what's going on here. It just kind of opened up a mystery for me. Like there's something doesn't seem right here, and I need to know what's going on. And I just spent like an hour or two with no restraint researching. And I'm an engineer. I understand how to research. I feel like I can tell good sources from poor sources. And I just was like, I'm not just going to listen to what the church people tell me. I'm going to really search. And within a couple hours, I was done. And it was done to the, like I could never go back. Kind of.
Oh, wow. And what year was this?
Would have been 2004.
Okay.
I think also it's important for him to tell you more about, he expresses his tidal wave about finding out, that one of his grandpas was a polygamist, linking back a little bit to just the sexual abuse that went on in his family.
Yeah. So if you've experienced sexual abuse, physical abuse, and then you're seeing polygamy that starts to feel abusive,
right?
Yeah,
I can see that being very triggering for you, David.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt linked to me. I can't say I can't blame it on that. I don't think that's.
Well, I think that was a huge component.
No. I mean, that could make you sensitive to matters of abuse. There's nothing devaluing about that. That's just. But David, you're saying it was other things too. David, really quickly, in 2004, that's the year I moved to Logan. So we were both in Logan at the same time. There weren't, CES letter didn't exist then. Mormon Think didn't exist then. Mormon Stories didn't exist then. Just list in just one sentence any resources that were available to you that helped you kind of figure these things out.
I can't remember any specific resource, honestly. There wasn't.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Looking at the things that were giving me trouble, that I was finding resources that would reference me to things in like the Journal of Discourses and things that were written and published by the church, but my problems weren't with some other foreign material. My problems were material that was actually that you could look at on church's website right now.
Got it.
Look up from Journal of Discourses. So it was actual writings of the early leaders of the church. But I don't remember what references kind of brought me to those, because it's obviously the church doesn't point those out. I had other resources saying, go look at this, and I would look at these churches and have problems with them.
Got it. So Kirsten, were you aware that David was going through this, or did he? How did you become aware that David had lost his faith?
Yes, you are very aware, especially when it's your spouse. It became a big source of conflict.
How'd you first find out?
I've grown a lot. Well, he just started saying, I don't want to go to church anymore. And just really being, adamant about that.
Did he not tell you why at first?
No, he was able to tell me the whole time what he was feeling and what he was experiencing.
Okay, so the whole time he's studying, he's telling you about what he's learning. Is that right?
I mean, I would have to ask. And back then, honestly, our communication was not optimal between each other. It was very hurtful. I wish we would have been able to have your marriage, interfaith marriage that we just experienced.
The retreat? Retreat?
Like way back. I mean, I think there was such positive information given by both you and Julie in, that emotional intimacy portion where it could have really saved a lot of hurt and turmoil in the way that we were communicating with each other, because it became more of an attack session between the two of us, and you can't do that to each other. I mean, it doesn't move you along in your relationship in a positive way. So, we love counseling. We've been to marriage counseling. We've been to family counseling, many different things over the years.
Before you jump to that, if it's okay, I'm going to jump in with some questions here and there. So David, what were you feeling in relation to Kirsten in your marriage as you are aware that your marriage was built upon this agreement that you would both be committed to the gospel, and then you're learning this stuff, feeling angry, and you're realizing you don't want to go to church anymore, as you're contemplating talking to Kirsten about this, what's going through your mind? Can you even remember 13 years ago? Were you scared? Were you angry? Were you eager, happy? Like what, when you thought about trying to communicate this to Kirsten, what was that like for you? What were you feeling and thinking?
Right. So, well, keep in mind that at this time in our lives, we had our son on chemo. So there was a lot of other distractions going on. So like Kirsten said, our communication wasn't awesome at the time, but there was a lot of reasons for that, a lot of things going on that were kind of pulling us in those different directions.
It was a bad time. It was the worst possible time to be having this.
Oh, but isn't that how life works?
It is. It is.
But yeah, on my feelings inside, I felt, for one thing, my feelings, I just felt betrayed. I felt like holy crap, I've spent all this time just feeling like all this inner, because my experience in the church has been like a lot of shame and guilt and just pressure and just, it's been really hard emotions inside, and feeling like these church leaders have been pushing me to do this and this and this and this and just really putting their thumbs down on me is how it felt. And they've got this stuff going on that they're not being open about. So I felt kind of betrayed and violated just by the church. And I knew that Kirsten was not going to be on board with this, but I felt like there was just no other way. I had to tell her, and I had to be open with her about it. But it was sort of something I had to do that. I just knew that I knew that this was not going to be easy, that it was going to be very hard and long lasting. I knew that, and it also felt a little bit like being just in the twilight zone. Like, to me, the problems were just so obvious. And yet I'm in Logan, and Logan is you've lived there, so, and everybody there believes, and everybody's a member, and why would you even doubt it? And I felt very isolated, very, very alone, and felt kind of betrayed. So.
And how did you feel like Kirsten was going to respond? What were your fears about Kirsten and her response, and how it might affect your marriage?
Yeah, I didn't think that it would end our marriage. I never really thought that in my head, but I knew that it was going to be a lot of turmoil. I remember when I first told her that she was just crying very openly, very sad, and I knew it was going to be a lot of pain. I knew that, and it really was a lot of pain. I wasn't planning on going anywhere myself, and I didn't feel. I know Kirsten. I knew her then. I didn't feel like she'd be going anywhere. She's kind of a person she's a very, very loyal kind of a person that will stand by. If she's committed to somebody, she stands by them. That's just how she is for a lot of years. So.
Wow, that's, I've had this theory that for many couples, a mixed faith marriage doesn't necessarily ruin a marriage. What it does is it sort of reveals and exposes a marriage exactly for what it is. And it sounds like, David, maybe both of you are just two people that are very committed to each other and committed to your relationship. And wow, so it sounds like you didn't even have to deal with that fear of being left or abandoned or divorced. And in that case, it just became a matter of how you dealt with it. For so many others, I think maybe they really weren't as committed to each other. They were committed to the gospel. And so when the gospel foundation erodes, then the marriage erodes. But it sounds like you guys really had a solid commitment to each other, and the church was part of the foundation, but it wasn't the foundation of your commitment to each other. Or at least it wasn't conditional. Maybe, Kirsten, for you, it was the foundation of your commitment, but your commitment was unwavering. Did you contemplate, Kirsten, wanting to end the marriage?
No, that was not the piece that would have ended our marriage. the thing that would have ended our marriage was the alcoholism, and we can go into that further.
Okay.
That is when I did contemplate about
Okay.
divorce.
So just to summarize from your perspective, Kirsten, once he tells you, once you know he's done, once you know he's angry, what was that like for you? Especially during such an incredibly difficult time in your life.
Like he said, it was very, I went through a grieving process. I was very sad. I was very disappointed. It's been an interesting journey. You know, back then I was very focused on, oh my goodness, what are my neighbors going to think when I go to church and my husband's not with me? You know, kind of living up to the Joneses next door type theory in my mind. Interestingly enough, having gone through this experience with each other, you kind of hit it in your comments on the head. You know, it has strengthened our marriage extremely. Has it been a process? Yes, it's been a huge process, and we continually gain healthy insight through our experiences, but we put ourselves there. Does that make sense? Like,
sure.
We take the opportunity to take, I personally was the one that said, we need to go to this marriage retreat with Julie and John. You know,
Right.
We're always looking for things to grow in our relationship, to communicate better, and to truly understand each other. You're right. From the very, very beginning, Dave and I had a commitment to each other as people. And, you know, when we started to bring children into the world, we always had a goal that we wanted our children to feel loved and to come home and to want to come home. And so that's where we've built our family from. Of course, the religious component is extremely important in that. Having had this experience, though, in my life, it really boils down to love and the connection between us as humans. And, you know.
I love it. I'm inspired. I think that's the way marriages should be. You should be committed to each other, to the marriage, to the children, and fight for it for as long as you can. But something like religion should never make a family break up. And it should never make one spouse feel like they're a disappointment, because no one wants to live feeling like a disappointment. So David, tell us how the alcoholism began for you.
Right. So I think a lot of, I just want to clear one thing up, because I think a lot of times people lose belief in the church and they get accused of wanting to leave just so they can go out and party or drink. And it was absolutely not the case for me. I did not have issues with the church to justify me going and drinking. The starting to drink came pretty soon after this major shelf crash. The starting to drink came pretty soon after that, but it was absolutely not a reason why. The drinking was just a separate issue. It was related to that, but there's more to it, and we'll get into this as we talk about the recovery side of things, as I started to understand my patterns. But yeah, I just started to drink, and Kirsten was gone a lot. She was gone a lot with our son in chemotherapy, so they were off spending a lot of time, and she'd be like overnight trips in the hospital. And and she didn't approve of me drinking. I knew she wouldn't, so I would, in secret, I would drink when she was gone. I'm not proud of that at all, right? That my son's off being treated for chemotherapy, and Dad's at home drinking alcohol. It's not a great glamorous story that I'm proud of, but that's reality of when I would drink.
And again, tell us what the function of the drinking was for you. I'm drinking because why? In your mind, in your feelings, your emotions.
Well, at the time, there was I didn't have all that put together, right? That's something that I put together later as I start to evaluate and understand things and to recover. It's not, I think that the active alcoholic or drug addict, I'm not a drug addict, but I would think they're kind of the same thing. At the time, an active alcoholic doesn't tend to know the reasons why. That's something that you want to recover. So I had no idea.
So at the time, what do you think the thought process was? And it could be just an emotional process, but summarize it in a sentence or two. Like how do you go from like active Mormon, now you're struggling? What sort of pushes you to that point of alcohol? What was it?
I decided to drink, and I drank, and it was awesome. It felt so good, and it was so relieving. And there was this period of a few hours or whatever where I just felt really good, and I knew the first time that I want to do this whenever I can, because it just felt so good.
So you're just like, hey, I know there's this way to feel good. I tried it back before I served my mission. Now I can do this again. So whenever I want to feel good, I'll drink. Is that kind of an okay summary?
I never related it back to my use of marijuana, and I drank sometimes as a youth, but drinking as an adult, I never related it back to that. I don't remember ever thinking this was awesome back then, I can have it again now. It was actually kind of a new experience.
Okay. But was it, there's this way to feel good, and I want to feel good, so I'm going to feel good.